The government did not seem in certain exchanges to be prepared to come and talk to these justices. Like Neil Gorsuch is going to ask you about Native Americans.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Genuinely glad you are here for this one because this conversation is something else. So what you are about to watch is a panel of political commentators going head-to-head over one of the most debated constitutional questions in recent memory, birthright citizenship. Jessica is holding her ground with courtroom facts, while the rest of the panel is pushing hard from the other direction, and at one point the tension in that room becomes almost impossible to ignore. What makes this one different from the usual back and forth is that even people who agree on the destination cannot agree on how to get there, and that disagreement ends up saying more than the argument itself does. You stick with this one all the way through because the moment that changes the entire energy of this conversation does not come early. It builds, and when it lands, you will want to have seen everything leading up to it. Also, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you are watching this from. I genuinely love seeing where this community stretches across the globe, so say hello down there. All right, let's get into it.
So, for a long time leading up to this, people have been saying, people, as in legal scholars, that President Trump was likely to lose on this. It's not that the issue isn't an important one. It's that going about it through an executive order might be the wrong way to try to achieve a policy goal. Over and over again, what do we face? Congress just abdicates its responsibility, walks away, and presidents get frustrated. And they said, we want to solve something. So on day one, President Trump, who has thought about this issue for many years, he's run on immigration, he says, this stops today. And it's interesting because all of a sudden, the Democrats are strict constitutionalists, and they love the originalism argument, of which they have hated from Thomas and Alito, Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Roberts. But now all of a sudden they're like, that's not what the Constitution says. And so as somebody who, I have always believed that let's stick with the Constitution. However, I also think that there's nothing wrong with the Supreme Court saying to the Congress, this issue should be fixed, but it's not going to work with just this executive order. Now, maybe it'll turn out that the president wins on this one, but this is the last point I'll make on this that I thought was so disturbing because I don't really understand it. Maybe somebody here is going to explain it to me. In 2006, I was deputy press secretary, and the average poll of how people felt about this issue was that 45% of Americans thought that everyone who was born in America automatically became a U.S. citizen. 45%. Today, it's 69% think that anyone who was born in America, even after all of these things, all these stories, people coming here just to have their babies. And I'm not sure where public opinion changed on this. I could maybe take a guess, but it's gone up steadily since 2006. And so if Congress were to take it on, I'm not sure how it would turn out.
Well, if you're a green card holder, Jessica, you come here, you have a baby, that baby's an American citizen, and that's fine. What you're saying is that if you're an illegal alien whose allegiance is to Guatemala and he crosses over and dumps a baby out, then all of a sudden they're a citizen and so's the mother, or a tourist from China to come in, have a baby in like American Samoa and then go back to Beijing. It's being abused. You'd agree with that?
Not completely.
You wouldn't
I think
agree that that's
also
abuse?
Some degree of it, yes, but the numbers, and Chief Justice Roberts was batting the government back on that particular issue, saying that you are picking a few isolated incidents for then a sweeping judicial theory, and that he wouldn't go along with it.
Whoa. 9% of the births are from people that aren't really American citizens. That's not
But
small
I'm
amount.
saying, which I'm not on the Supreme Court. All I can do is ingest what I saw the exchanges were and then report them. And the evidence that the government was using, talking about birth tourism, talking about how kids of diplomats don't get citizenship, so why should this be different, et cetera, Justice Roberts was poo-pooing it. That's what was happening. Dana's totally right about the close 70% of people who approve of birthright citizenship right now. I think you get into very sticky territory if you're talking about people who are on even temporary visas. If someone overstays it by a week or two, you have people in the U.S. government right now, Marco Rubio, Kash Patel, Usha Vance. These are people who have their citizenship because of birthright citizenship. And you know that today didn't go well because Donald Trump's Truth Social post, once he left, was, we are the only country in the world stupid enough to allow birthright citizenship. He didn't say the government kicked butt. He didn't say we're going to win this thing.
This is the part that people need to sit with, because before a single argument was even made in that courtroom, legal scholars, not activists, not politicians, legal scholars, were already saying this executive order was likely to lose. And here is what blows my mind about that. Dana, who is not exactly a liberal voice on that panel, came out and said it plainly. Dana said this, people as in legal scholars, that the president was likely to lose on this. And then she followed it up saying this, going about it through an executive order might be the wrong way to try to achieve a policy goal. You have to understand what that means coming from someone on that side of the table. That is not the opposition talking. That is someone who agrees with the policy goal, admitting the method was flawed from the start. And that matters because it tells you this was never really about constitutional law. It was about speed. It was about doing something dramatic on day one, regardless of whether it would survive legal scrutiny. And here is what people don't realize about the 14th Amendment. It was ratified in 1868, right after the Civil War, specifically to guarantee that formerly enslaved people and their children could never be stripped of citizenship again. That was the entire purpose, to make citizenship something that could not be taken away based on who your parents were. So when you try to rewrite that through a single executive action, you are not just challenging an immigration policy, you are touching the foundation of what that amendment was built to protect. Then Jessica steps in and the panel shifts entirely. Because Jessica was not speculating. She was reporting what she watched happen inside that courtroom. And when she said the justices were batting the government back, saying they were picking a few isolated incidents for a sweeping judicial theory, that is not opinion. That is what happened in the room. And then comes the moment that really landed. Jessica pointed out that Justice Roberts was not buying the birth tourism argument either. The government walked in with their evidence, laid it out, and the Chief Justice dismissed it. When you lose the room at that level, it is not a close call. That is a signal.
He said, basically, I'm throwing a temper tantrum. And a couple
That
of
was a fact. Is that not a fact?
It doesn't.
Or it doesn't matter?
No, it actually doesn't matter because you know how he behaves when he's excited about something. You know how he behaves
You're
when he's
focusing on
upset.
emotion and not the fact that he said the absolute
Hold on one
truth.
second. The government did not seem in certain exchanges to be prepared to come and talk to these justices. Like Neil Gorsuch is going to ask you about Native Americans. He always talks about Native Americans.
Yeah.
No response about what was going to happen there. Justice Barrett talking about...
It's already been adjudicated. Native Americans
He said, oh, I
have
don't think so.
citizenship.
No, did you hear him? Did you listen to how he responded? He said, I don't know. I don't think so. Justice Barrett, another time that happened.
You're ignoring some of the facts that were laid out today. You say this is a small sliver. False. Go check out the data from the Government Accountability Institute, which they made reference to today. 1 million people, they believe, went to the Northern Mariana Islands from China and became U.S. citizens. There are 500 firms, this was listed today, in China that make this a cottage industry, inserting the Chinese Communist Party into our country. Now, what this could translate to, according to Eric Eggers, is 1 million new voters by 2030. I think we can all agree that that is a perilous state. If you have people from China coming over, giving birth, 1 million new voters by 2030, that is a big problem. And it is inconceivable to think that the framers of the 1868 14th Amendment, that's the year it was ratified, had an idea that 4 billion women in the world could come here, give birth, take a plane ride, and boom, you're a U.S. citizen. It's inconceivable on its face.
Greg.
Yeah, you're an illegal and you come here and you have a baby that is not a citizen. And it amazes me that by saying that, you are somehow portrayed as harsh. By saying something that is so obviously sensible that, like, if you, it makes it, as Donald Trump says, and it's so mean, and I'm going to get to that. No other country does this. No other country does this. And why? Because nobody wants to do it in those countries. There's nobody clamoring in to try to game the system to have babies in Haiti. All right? So you're saying they're all coming here. What does that tell you? The system is being gamed. So how did this happen when you're talking about these polls? I don't think the polls are real, but I do think that there has been a shift due to redefining in the last, I would say 15 or 20 years, redefining common sense patriotism as intolerant, xenophobic, but most important, mean. So if you think about every segment that we do or every position we're on, we are always portrayed as mean.
This is the part that should have stopped the entire conversation cold, because Jessica brought up something that nobody on that panel had a real answer for. She named Marco Rubio, Kash Patel, and Usha Vance, people sitting inside the current administration right now, and pointed out that their citizenship exists because of birthright citizenship. The very policy being challenged in court is the reason those people are American citizens today. Think about that for a second. You cannot argue that a policy is a loophole being exploited by people who do not belong here, while simultaneously having people who benefited from that exact policy running your government. That contradiction does not go away just because nobody wants to address it directly. Yeah, and then Jessica said this. The government did not seem in certain exchanges to be prepared to come and talk to these justices. That line is significant. This was not a surprise hearing. The government had time to prepare. Justice Neil Gorsuch asking about Native Americans is not a curveball. Jessica literally said he always talks about Native Americans. That is a predictable line of questioning from a justice known for his positions on tribal sovereignty, and the government had no prepared answer. Jessica then said this. Did you listen to how he responded? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know and I don't think so are not answers you give to a Supreme Court justice. That is the legal equivalent of showing up to the most important exam of your life and leaving half the paper blank. And here is what I find fascinating from a historical standpoint. The United States has faced this exact tension before. After the Civil War, the government had to decide whether citizenship would be defined by blood, by soil, or by allegiance. The 14th Amendment settled it by choosing soil. Every attempt since then to narrow that definition has faced the same constitutional wall. That wall did not appear overnight. It was built deliberately. And walking into the Supreme Court unprepared to explain why that wall should come down now is not a legal strategy. That is an embarrassment. Greg then tried to reframe the whole thing as a cultural argument, saying that anyone who pushes back on this position gets labeled mean. And look, I understand the frustration with that framing, but there is a difference between being called mean and being caught unprepared in federal court. One is a feelings argument, the other is a legal reality.
So when you say men cannot be women, men cannot be in women's sports, you are intolerant and you are mean. If you say illegals need to be deported, all illegals, I think the worst first, but in the long run, you never know who the worst is first because you let them all in. Yes, that is so mean. You think this guy should go to prison? I mean, he had a terrible upbringing. Yes, he should go away for 25 years. That is so mean. Every single policy that the Democrats try to shove down your throats is based on the fact that somehow when you take a stand to protect your country or your family, it's somehow mean. This is like, I really do think this is a dangerous culture. Now, I keep thinking to myself, what if the supporters of birthright citizenship were gung-ho patriotic Americans who said, we need to do this, and we align it with a dedicated citizenship assimilation path. So we have the American ideal protected, valued, cherished. I'd be like, wow, that's pretty amazing that these people feel that way. But the problem is the people that are pushing birthright are the people who reject American culture, who reject assimilation, who embrace the so-called tenets of diversity and identity politics, who believe that America as an idea is not just flawed, but evil and in need of radical change. So I don't trust. This is why all the arguments about birthright citizens are what ifs, analogies. Kenji Jackson Brown, my favorite artist, was comparing it to getting your wallet stolen in Japan. They cannot live in the real world where you see the incentives and you see the actual data. So instead, they live in analogies. And then they look at you and they go, you're just mean. And everybody said so. We have this poll that says you're just really mean for believing this way. I don't care. We're right on this. Anybody's, if an illegal has a baby in your country and that makes that baby a citizen, no.
But
duh.
Does Justice Roberts then fall into the category?
I don't know. He's got.
No, I just think that also
He's not right about everything. And Supreme
Okay.
Courts have made decisions, and so have politicians that have been wrong. And we're left that way for
Okay.
a century.
But we-
I can think of a couple of them, Jessica, that were then overturned.
But we let Congress off the hook over and over again. Britain did have birthright citizenship, and in the late 1800s, they changed it by law. You can do something without an executive order that's going to fail in the Supreme Court. It just takes a little gumption.
Here is where the conversation reveals something deeper, because once the legal arguments started falling apart, the panel shifted into culture war territory, and that shift is telling. When your strongest legal minds are not buying your argument and the justices you were counting on are pushing back, what do? You move the conversation to who gets called mean and who does not. That is not winning. That is redirecting. And then Jessica asked something that cut right through it. She said this: does Justice Roberts then fall into the category? Meaning, if we are now dismissing everyone who disagrees as wrong or misguided, where does that leave a conservative-appointed Chief Justice who also was not convinced by the government's case? Nobody had a clean answer for that, because there is no clean answer. What sealed it for me was Dana closing the whole segment. Dana pointed out that Britain had birthright citizenship in the late 1800s and changed it, not through an executive order, not through a dramatic courtroom fight, but through legislation, through the actual democratic process. And then Dana said directly, you can do something without an executive order that is going to fail in the Supreme Court. That is the whole argument right there. Not from a liberal commentator, not from an activist, from someone on the same panel who supports the underlying goal. The method failed, and the people who care most about the outcome should be the most upset about that. Because a loss at the Supreme Court does not just kill the executive order. It sets a legal precedent that makes the next attempt even harder. And you have to understand, when a constitutional question gets decided at that level, it does not just go away quietly. It becomes the standard that every future argument has to work around. So if this case goes badly, it is not just one policy that suffers. It is the entire conversation about how citizenship is defined going forward. That is what was actually at stake in that room. And walking in unprepared was not just a bad day. It was a moment that could echo for a very long time. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.